Now, can we have everyone on mute, please? Because there's still some background noise. And David Kirkwood, it's telling me it's you, so I'm going to name and shame.
Ah, right, okay.
Sorry.
And the trouble is, when I mute, I can't hear anything coming your end.
In the box on the top right-hand side of your screen, with the go-to meeting, there's a green sort of microphone. If you click on that, that should mute you. That appears to have done the trick. Fantastic. Okay, let's get started. Thank you all very much for joining me this afternoon. What I'm going to do is take you through some of the background to the research that we're doing within the NHS in partnership with NHS suppliers, and take you through some of the purpose of what we'll be doing and some of the reporting outputs, show you what those look like and the kinds of information that you'll get at the end of it. And you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions as well about how it's all going to work, and I will endeavour to answer those to the best of my ability. We've got an hour for this session, but I don't imagine we're going to take the full hour. So I imagine half an hour is more reasonable. So let me just introduce myself. My name's Andrew Cox. I'm an associate consultant with Questback. I'm an assessment psychologist, and I've been involved with employee research now for about 20 years. And over the last 6 months or so, I've been looking particularly at the gender pay gap and the cultural elements behind the reinforcement and the perpetuation of the gender pay gap. And this is the focus of research that we conducted earlier on in the year with financial sector organisations, and now we are conducting within NHS trusts. So hopefully I can give you a little bit of a background about what the research is, what the rationale is, what the outputs are going to be, and how you can use them. So if I can just scroll through. Okay, just a little bit of scene setting. I know you're all aware of the requirement for the gender pay gap reporting. That is April of last year, and will be April of this year, and will be at least for the next 5 years, and possibly longer. Also, of course, the government is now in consultation over including ethnicity pay gap reporting as well. The results of that are yet to be pronounced, but that is a possibility in future as well. All NHS trusts obviously reported on their gender pay gaps, and 9 out of 10 trusts showed that they had gender pay gaps in favour of men, and there was a great deal of variation across trusts. Some were significantly lower than the average of 18%, which is the average for UK employers, and some were significantly higher. And the conclusion was from the ONS that the main reason behind the gender pay gap is not because men and women are paid differentially for doing the same work, although there's a slight element of that. The vast majority is due to the fact that there are many more men than women in more senior and or more highly paid roles. And in some financial sector organizations, that accounts for nearly 50%. So men, on average, get paid in some organizations up to 50% more than women, double women. It's not quite that bad in some of the trusts, but there is an issue, clearly. Now, also according to the ONS, 2/3 of the UK gender pay gap was unexplained. So if you looked at traditional things like flexible working and maternity leave and these kinds of things, they accounted for some of the difference, but the vast majority of the difference wasn't explained. And this is because this is down to cultural factors. Now, This is a very common model of culture. It's from a guy called Edgar Schein, who's a organizational psychologist, and it's a very sort of familiar model. Most of what you can see above the surface in terms of culture around behaviors and artifacts and espoused values. If you ask people what they stand for and what their cultural importance for them is, they will tell you. But the majority of what governs and controls culture is subconscious. It's underneath the surface. It's that basic sort of underlying assumptions that are generally not expressed, and people are generally not terribly well aware of them. But they are very, very important. And they take the form of assumptions about what the consequences of particular behaviors will be. So if I do this, then this will happen. If I speak up and challenge something, I will get into trouble. Or if I speak up and challenge, I'll be thanked for it. If I apply for this role, I won't be chosen because of this, that, or the other. If I promote this person, I won't be thanked because they're not the kind of person that we're looking for. These kinds of assumptions. And changing culture requires an understanding of what those assumptions are so that they can be challenged themselves and they can be brought to the surface and made conscious. So part of the point of the research that we're conducting is to help those underlying assumptions come to the surface so that they can be challenged, so that decisions can be made in a much more conscious way. The research itself is from a tool called Questback, which is a tool that we've been developing here with Questback over the last 9 months or so. And it assesses the impact of culture, particularly on the decisions that are made about people with regard to their promotion and their remuneration, and the decisions that they make about themselves. So culture is as much about the decisions people make about themselves as the decisions that are made about them. The third element that the research looks into is personal experience. What has happened to me when I've put myself forward for a position? Did I find the process fair? Were the equal opportunities, processes followed? So looking at recruitment, promotion, performance management, and reward, what's been my experience? And the whole point of this is to develop actions so that these issues that we uncover can be addressed. We can look at specific strategies to start changing the culture in a way that starts closing those gaps between those remuneration and reward promotional decisions. Now, part of that will be to get a best practice group together. So one of the big advantages of this kind of research, where we've got a large number of NHS trusts involved, is that we get a lot of data, which is great. We can look at that in a holistic sense across the NHS more generally. We get a large number of responses and we can share that across the organizations. But we can also, in the follow-up, start best practice groups in terms of learning from one another about what's working, what doesn't appear to be working so well, what practical strategies we can apply going forward. Now, one of the things that I've found is a lot of organizations, when they look at the gender pay gap, they do some kind of generic training. It typically tends to be around unconscious bias, and they tend to look at setting quotas in terms of getting more female employees into senior management positions or better paid positions, which is fine. But this doesn't actually do very much to address the root causes. And as we've discussed earlier, the root causes are largely cultural. And one of those things is that cultural factors are, by and large, subconscious. So how can we bring this level of understanding regarding issues up within our organizations, and particularly within the decision-making community, senior managers, recruitment managers, HR, those who are making the decisions around recruitment, promotion, and reward. We're also this time broadening the scope, so we're looking at a wide range of demographics, including gender. We're also including ethnicity, things like sexual orientation, disability, to look at the D&I agenda more widely. The focus hasn't been taken away from the gender pay gap, but we're also starting to look at the impacts culture has on decisions made with regard to promotion for those other groups. And also we can look at things like grade, location, job role, length of service, and the impact that those things have on the decisions that people make as well. Now, a big part of the problem, or a big part of the issue, is also when procedures and processes are being followed or are not being followed. So we're going to look at those as well. And also, as I said before, the big part of this is going to be, can we learn and share, and as a D&I community more generally within the NHS, help to develop a set of best practices to help us. So, the main aim is to understand the cultural factors behind the gender pay gap, particularly with regard to talent management, career development, and reward. So in terms of how we present this research to potential employees to complete it, that's the framework under which we're explaining what it's for. It's to explore talent management, career development, and reward, not the gender pay gap. We have the gender pay gap data. We know what that is. What we're looking at is the cultural stuff with regard to talent management, career development, and reward. So that's the way it should be framed and presented to people. The second thing is that this is designed to provide us with evidence-based for target interventions. So the interventions we take are not based on guesswork, not based on sort of generic approaches, but they're much more targeted where they're needed in the area that they're specifically needed. It'll provide us a means of tracking improvements over time, because I think everyone acknowledges that closing the gender pay gap is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to happen over a number of years, and it's going to take some concerted effort. So the more information we can show about how the steps we're taking are making a difference or not, then we can start really targeting what we're doing in an informed way. And there at the bottom, the special interest community is a really important part of it in terms of developing and sharing best practices. So for those of you who've signed up to do it in January, fantastic, thank you very much. We're really glad to have you on board. We've got quite a number of trusts behind us now. So that first cut of data that we should have within March will be very robust and should have a very large number of responses. Obviously, the more we have, the better. Online completion only. We don't have any paper elements to this, and that will be completed through online email links that can be accessed either through email accounts or through QR codes, which can be scanned in for handheld devices, for example. And one thing to point out in terms of positioning it, this is very different and distinct from the NHS staff survey, has a very different purpose, and will be branded very differently. One thing you will see, if you've already looked at the link to the survey itself, the only thing really we've duplicated from the NHS staff survey itself is some of the demographic categories, because obviously we didn't want to start reinventing the wheel as far as those were concerned, but the contents itself in terms of the assessment are very, very different. What it's not is a means of looking at the causes of the gender pay gap in terms of the structural elements. So it won't tell you what the differences are in pay levels between different groups of staff. What it will only tell you is the cultural elements and the attitudinal and assumptions people are making. Neither is it an investigation of non-compliance or regulatory issues or a whistleblowing mechanism. Those obviously need to be done through other means, and it certainly isn't a league tabling exercise. We'll not be comparing one trust's results against another, except for the idea behind the sharing of best practice. So that will be one way of looking at it. So, in terms of the outputs themselves, what I was hoping to show you was an online dashboard which we've developed, which allows us to dice and slice the results in real time. I'm presenting this from Questback's offices, and at the moment their servers are having a bit of a mare. So what I've done is I've put some screenshots together. So this will show you what the interactive dashboard looks like. It's an online dashboard which allows you to access the results of the survey so that you can dice and slice and interrogate it to your heart's content. Now that effectively means you can look at the different results for different groups of staff, so men and women, different groups based on ethnicity and disability and sexual orientation, and look at the different decisions being made by them and the different experiences the different groups have with regard to their organizations and promotion and reward. So one of these are real results from the survey we conducted earlier on in the year. I'm not prejudging what the results will be for the NHS, but one of the reasons we started the pilot for this within financial services firms was that as a sector they had the largest gender pay gap. And one of the things that we found was if we asked very generalized questions about whether people believed that people succeeded on merit in their company, we got very positive results. Now, bearing in mind, this research was conducted on a random sample of 1,000 people working within UK financial services just weeks after the publication of the gender pay gap data, where some of those organizations had posted gender pay gaps of 30, 40, up to 50%. Despite that backdrop, 72% of men and 68% of women said that they believed that their people succeeded on merit in their company. So the vast majority still felt that success was based on merit. Now this highlights what I was saying earlier about the cultural elements being largely unconscious. The second question there, you'll see, I believe my company does a great job of providing equality of opportunity for all employees regardless of gender. Same survey, same time, and still we had a very large number of women, in fact more women than men, saying that they felt that that was the case. So how can we rationalize this? Well, we need to look at under the surface and dig a little bit deeper about why people responded that way. We are able to dice and slice those results by different groups, as I've said, and here what we did was we looked at the senior management community. So we took out everybody who wasn't a senior manager, and we found that 93% of senior managers thought that people succeeded on merit, and 82.5% of women in senior management positions. Now this means that senior managers are even less aware of the problem than the general population, which is a bit of a worry, seeing as if you're looking for somebody to really start addressing the issue, you're likely to start looking at your senior management population because they're the ones who generally make these kinds of decisions. And so obviously raising awareness of the issue and of the decisions is one of the first things that we need to be doing. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is, I've just been told that our servers are back on, so I'm going to try and see if I can get in. So if you bear with me 1 second. Excellent, it appears to be working. So when we release the results, you will receive access to an online dashboard, much like this one. And it includes an individualized login. This allows you to access your results securely, the results for the NHS overall. If you have a large enough number of responses, and if you want to go down that route, we can also provide you with trust-specific results. How we do that, we need to discuss a little bit further later. And Alex, who sent out the email and the details for this, we'll have some more detail about that in due course. So I put in my password, and that gives me access to the online dashboard. It'll take a couple of seconds. Okay, now this is the online dashboard. This is real data from the real survey that we conducted with the financial sector organizations. And as I said, it allows you to really interrogate the data, get to the bottom of what people are saying, the differences between different groups, and really get a clear picture of what tends to be driving the disparities between the experiences of men and women. Now here, what I highlighted before was the percentage who said they believed that people succeeded on merit or not, just to prove you that it's real. If I take out line managers and the other categories there and just leave senior manager, if I apply, then you'll see the results update to just show the results for senior management. And as you can see, those have increased. Now, one of the main elements of this survey is what we call the talent parity index. And essentially, this is an assessment of the degree to which there is perceived gender bias in the decisions that are being made with regard to reward and performance management and progression within your organizations. And here, as you'll see, within the financial sector at least, there's quite a bias in favor of male employees. What does that mean? How did we get there? First of all, what I'll need to do is to show you this slide. Now, if you've had a chance to have a look at the online questionnaire, you will have seen that we ask respondents to say, in terms of your experience within your trust, when decisions are made about putting people into senior positions, promotion or whatever, what are the most important traits that are looked for? The second part is, how masculine or feminine do you feel these traits are? And what we found is a very close relationship between how masculine the traits are perceived to be and how they are valued and rewarded in leadership roles. So we've got a very strong positive correlation between how valued they're perceived to be and how masculine they are. Now, this is how people perceive the organizations. When we say, well, okay, what is the optimal level if our organization is to perform at an optimal in an optimal way? And as you can see, people say then we need to be much flatter in our profile. Those feminine traits need to be given a lot more importance in terms of valuing and rewarding them. There is still a slight slant to the masculine, and when you look at different groups, that varies according to those different groups. But it's a very easy and quick way to say we have this observed bias, but actually, if we combine those two, we need to dial up the things on those elements which we consider to be more feminine, and perhaps tone down some of those in terms of masculine. Now, this has a lot of implications. First, in terms of what we're looking for within candidates, how we structure job descriptions, how we structure job interviews and advertisements and competency frameworks, and how we think about the recruitment and the promotion process in the round, so we get a much more balanced profile of skills, leadership skills in our leadership community. Now, this is not to say that women cannot exhibit masculine traits or vice versa, but what it does allow us to do is really scrutinize the kinds of decisions that we're making and how those are perceived, so that we've got a much more self-aware and self-critical, if you like, way of looking at how we're making decisions, particularly within the senior management community and the HR community and those hiring managers and whatnot. We also ask a number of other questions regarding people's experience more generally. For example, here, if I look at cultural fit, what we find is a fair difference between men and women in terms of things like my best chance of achieving more senior role lies outside this company, or I feel that if I was promoted to a leadership position, I would be readily accepted. So it's around those things about how I feel I would fit in to that senior management cadre and how I would be accepted. What we're also looking for here is people's experience with the process of applying for more senior roles and the decisions that they've made with regard to that. So, for example, here we have that path starting from the left-hand side. Did you apply for a more senior role or a better paid post in your current company? This would be within your trust, obviously, for the NHS survey. And if people have said no, we asked why not. And here we've got quite an interesting set of data which says that, for example, in terms of reasons for not applying for a job, a more senior role, the additional responsibility and demands outweigh the potential benefits. 22% for women, 14.5% for men. So clearly you've got those concerns around perhaps work-life balance and maybe caring responsibilities that are affecting the decisions that people are making. Similarly here, I didn't feel I had the necessary qualifications or experience. We have nearly twice as many women as men saying they didn't apply for a more senior post because of those reasons. Now, it's been widely publicized that women are slightly more critical, they're more self-critical, they're more likely to look down a list of required attributes and say, I don't fit them all, therefore I'm not going to apply. We don't know the reason behind this, but that would tend to suggest that this is a real thing, with almost twice as many women removing from the potential of a promotion based on that reason. So obviously, if we uncover these kinds of things, particularly certain roles, then we can start really tailoring the descriptions and tailoring those sort of competency-based interviews to take account of those kinds of things. Now, if they did apply, then we asked, was your application successful? Yes, no, yes, no. Very similar proportions between men and women. But if we ask, if unsuccessful, did you find the selection process fair? Men, despite being less likely to self-exclude, are much more likely to say that they found the process unfair if they didn't. And here we have, if you weren't successful, did you receive open and constructive feedback as to why the application was not successful? Basically, are those basic processes and procedures being followed post-interview to give feedback to the candidates? And only 20% of women and 16% of men said that they were. So here, clearly, it's not just a cultural thing. We've got an issue here with just those best practices, procedures being followed in terms of giving people feedback as to their applications and why they weren't successful. And then also, if we ask people to say, did they find the process fair or unfair, then we ask them in an open comment question to tell us why they didn't feel that it was, how it could be improved. Now, again, what we can do here is we can look at it by specific roles. We can look at the differential experiences of men and women, or different BAME groups, for example, or any other diversity groups for any role, location, length of service, or a combination of those. So, for example, if you wanted to look at the experience of Black and minority ethnic women, then you could do that by putting a combination of filters here. So it really does give you quite a lot of power to really dice and slice and look at those results in detail. And finally here, just to show, we have the ability to look at open comments. Again, dice and slice by the different demographic groups. And we can also look at what the respondents have said the comment is about. So if it's about benefits, discrimination, favoritism, these kinds of things, we can look at those little factors in isolation. So hopefully you can see that this gives us a very powerful tool for looking at the individual results, interrogating those. So as a D&I community, you get a lot of potential information at your fingertips. It allows you to present that back to your leadership in a way that hopefully helps to raise awareness of the issues at play, so you can have a much more tailored and targeted response to the issues that arise. Also, we have the capability of re-administering, say, 6 months after the original administration, so we can see any impact that's being made with regard to addressing some of these issues. So that's me pretty much done, I think, in terms of the presentation. Now I'm going to throw it open to some questions. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the documentation that Alex sent out yesterday along with the invitation. Hopefully a lot of the questions will be answered from the information there. Otherwise, I will endeavour to answer your questions to the best of my ability.
Andrew, it's Shahana Ramsden here. I'm head of diversity at NHS England. Could I ask her? I've got a few questions, but could I just start with one of them, which is what does the league tabling involve? So how is that?
There will be no.
Talks about
there will be no league tabling.
Okay.
That was why it was there. It's not going to be a league tabling exercise. What it will be is a best practice sharing exercise. So it will not be an opportunity to sort of name and shame. It'll be treated as an opportunity to say, okay, something appears to be really working here. How can we learn from this and you know, spread that best practice? So absolutely no league tabling. That is not the purpose. That is not the point.
Okay, that's really helpful. And the second question was, you talked about having a further breakdown in relation to other demographics such as race, disability, LGBT+. Does that mean that it's the same questionnaire, but you can break down the responses according to those different groups? Exactly.
In exactly the same way as you, within your within the staff survey, you have attitudinal questions and demographic questions. Mm-hmm. We can break down any of the responses to the other questions by those demographic groups. So we can look at the different LGBTQ categories, or you know, ethnicity or gender, or combinations of thereof, and also by the organizational demographics. So, you know, specialism and job role, whatever.
Okay, fantastic. And how there was one question I had about how definitions and whether we can personalize these. For example, we're an arm's length body, and so our definition of a senior manager may be different to a wider NHS trust. So
what we've done is for this exercise, we have kept the demographic categories exactly the same as those used for the NHS staff survey.
Okay.
And they're common to all. Now, if you have had a look at the link to the survey, there are quite a lot of them, but we've tried to keep it as simple as possible. So at the moment, those categories above and beyond what is asked for in the staff survey can't be customized. That's not to say that we may not be able to do that in future, but for this exercise, they are the same.
Okay. Last question, which is one of the slides talks about January, and that if it's free to participate in January. But what if an organisation wants to participate and it's not January?
Well, we're planning to launch or open the potential survey period in January next week, I believe, January 15th, I think, from the top of my head, but it will remain open until the end of February. So up until the end of February, any trust can participate in that opening tranche. Now that will allow us effectively to get a great deal of information together so we can build the reporting and build the dashboard. If an NHS trust wants to participate after then, they are at liberty to do so, but there is likely to be a charge because of the administration costs is greatly increased if they do it outside of that period.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, okay. We've got one. We've got a comment here. Not sure. Okay. Pilot. Yep. Thank you. I've received a written question. It's more of a comment than a question. So thank you very much. But it's not actually a question that I can answer. So if there are no other questions, that's great. What I'll do is I'll put up my final slide here, if I can access it. Oh, sorry, we do have a question. Yes, the question here is, we have a percentage of staff in bands 2 to 5 who still have very limited access to computers. Is there any scope for a hard copy? Now, that depends what you mean by a hard copy. If it's a hard copy of the report, yes, we will be generating an overview of the report findings, which we're going to distribute to people should they wish. If there be a hard copy of the survey questionnaire, no, there won't. There won't be any paper versions. But what people will be able to do is to scan in QR codes onto mobile devices. So I know the majority of people now have smartphones, so they are very able to do it on smartphone. It's enabled to support that, and if they have a QR code which can be put on a poster, for example, in a communal area, they can scan those in and participate that way. Okay, we have another question here. Hi, Andrew. This is from Lucy Butcher. Thank you, Lucy. Could you outline the input needed from trusts? Is it just a case of circulating the link to the survey? Yes, this is all outlined in the documentation, which is included with the link to this webinar, which was sent out yesterday by Alex Vilker. So what we do need from you is to distribute the links to your people, to publicize the survey so that we can get a good response rate, and provide us with things like trust logos so that we can personalize that element of the survey. And then we will provide you with weekly updates on the response rates, so you can target reminder activities as and when. We'll also give you a template for posters, which you can put up to publicize the survey in communal areas, for example, and those would have the QR codes that people can scan in so they can participate. So I hope that answers your question. Any further questions? You're welcome, Lucy. Okay. Super. Well, if there are no further questions, I'll close off there. The email that you received yesterday has contact details for, first of all, Alex Vilker from Questback, who's coordinating the survey administration from this end. So if you have any queries, please contact Alex. Also, if you have any questions regarding the involvement of NHS suppliers, Paul Deemer is handling things from the NHS suppliers angle, and also I think the result, his contact details are included within that documentation there. So thank you very much. Thank you for participating, and thank you for listening, and all the best with the administration of the survey. And I'm sure we'll be speaking again very shortly later on in the year, because we'll be getting those results out in March and starting that best practice community. So thank you very much for your time, and thanks. I'll close.
Thank you.